If one spouse has decided to leave, how can you save the family in this situation when your partner currently wants to end the relationship?
You need to quickly figure this out. What they were missing in the relationship. In other words, a person doesn't just leave for no reason at all, like they're just feeling a bit sad or want something out of the ordinary. For someone to leave a serious long term relationship, it means they've already reached their absolute boiling point, and their deep dissatisfaction, when they're not fulfilling some very strong, important need for themselves within the family, has gotten to the stage where they just can't take it anymore. That's it. She realizes that she's even ready to break off this relationship entirely, no matter how painful it might be, and she's finally ready to leave, to look for someone or something somewhere just to satisfy this need of hers. And that's why sometimes a woman will tell a man, "That's it, we're breaking up, I just can't handle it anymore." For example, your unhealthy attachment to your mom. And it's not just the two of us in this family, it's the three of us. She's there too. It's you, me, and your mom. Or, for example, when the man, for instance, he has no ambition at all, doesn't even try to earn money, and the woman has to carry all the burden herself. Or there are other situations, meaning there comes a point when a man doesn't provide a woman with what she needs for so long that eventually she says, "I'll either be on my own or look somewhere else. But with you, I just don't believe in this anymore." And if at that moment he actively gets involved in the process, if he realizes that this is really serious now, that tomorrow there will be papers filed in court, that he's losing his family, and that there's no guarantee the next woman in his life will be so easygoing, will look at him the same way, or see him as a superhero. So you made this woman unhappy, you contributed to her becoming really miserable and dissatisfied with you, but the next one you'll make happy. You'll be a blessing to her. But why would that suddenly happen if you as a person aren't changing at all? And so, at this point, you need to quickly figure out what my partner, my loved one, was missing. And what can I do now to at least start trying to meet those needs in some way? And that's exactly why you can save a relationship when you clearly understand what the other person needs. I
I think that quite often people leave relationships because, there comes a moment, just one, but a really painful one, when trust is lost, when it's completely gone. Basically, faith in the person is lost. Faith. In these relationships, the person realizes that they're now at a stage of some kind of crisis, conflict, endless arguments, and it feels inside like that's it. Nothing good can come of it anymore. That you can't turn back time and just live in that euphoria like it used to be. Is that really true? Is it really possible to cross that line and rebuild trust in each other? And most importantly, to bring back that feeling of love for each other.
I think that love isn't so much just a feeling as it is a feeling plus a feeling. In other words, it's a conscious act of will when we choose to focus our attention specifically on this person. And I think that anyone can fall in love with anyone else if they consciously choose to do so, if it's a deliberate act of will. And that's why, over time, you can get it back, and you can even make it better than it was before. Because I often try to draw this analogy in many different public presentations. Our professional work, our business or career, and likewise our family, are a direct and clear reflection, so to speak, a digital printout of our worldview and the fundamental decisions that we make every day. That is, if I, as a husband, make really poor decisions in my marriage, if I don't listen to or understand my wife, don't earn money, don't try to be her protector or friend, don't try to be a good lover for her, don't make an effort to support or inspire her in any way. In other words, if I don't work on myself, if I don't change, it leads to my wife starting to solve her own problems and issues on her own. She begins to distance herself from me emotionally, and I from her. We start to get offended, to take revenge on each other, and we begin to bombard each other with complaints. So it can't be that I'm such a great guy, I'm doing everything right in the family, but my wife is crying, my wife is unhappy, my wife is thinking about divorce, my wife is seeing a psychologist. Not because she wants to work on herself to reach the next level, but because she wants to avoid suicide. Not to commit it, but because everything that's happening in our marriage has pushed her so far into depression that she's just trying to save herself by seeing a psychologist. So, what's more important here? What I think about myself or my wife's condition? And for me personally, my wife's condition is always the indicator. I understand that I might think of myself as a super cool guy, that I'm really young, that I know everything, I get everything, that I'm just so smart. But if my wife is crying, if my wife is unhappy, then that's the real marker. That's the real indicator that there's something I don't understand, something I don't know, that I'm not growing in this area. And so, if a person honestly learns to analyze both their marriage and their professional work and truly understands that these are simply direct reflections of their inner thoughts, reflections of their core beliefs, and that the overall quality of their decision making directly affects what kind of marriage they have and what kind of work they do, if a person simply accepts this fundamental idea, they can then approach it from a curious researcher's perspective. For example, a husband, he looks at the relationship and thinks, aha, she's unhappy here, she's miserable there, here she's crying, and here's this. How can we change this? What don't you like? Why are you crying? Why do you feel hurt here? Where am I not hearing you? Where do you feel like I'm shutting you out? So the man starts to approach the situation in a completely different way if he understands that her tears are much closer to the truth, so to speak. They are closer to the truth than his own opinion about himself. Well, because if we see, sorry for the comparison, if we see, I don't know, a homeless person sitting by a heating pipe and he tells everyone and even thinks himself that he's a millionaire and has a successful business. But we see a broken down life. We see the life of a person who sleeps by the heating pipe. So we're not going to ask who's right here. Should we believe what he says or what we say? No, we understand clearly. We see a homeless person. We see a person who most likely makes bad decisions. There are tragic turns in life when someone's fate turns out tragically, but even then, there's still an element of choice that the person makes. And it's the same when we look at a marriage and see that this marriage is unhappy. We need to understand that this is 100% the result of my own decisions and my own mistakes. And this applies to both the husband and the wife. There's no such thing as a woman doing everything perfectly, being amazing in every way, and she just happened to end up with a tyrant, some closed-off guy who doesn't earn money, an abuser. He's just completely bad. She's an angel, he's a demon. People like that simply don't cross paths with each other. A person who's an angel wouldn't choose a demon, and the same goes the other way around. That's why we understand that sometimes it's 90 to 10 or 80 to 20. That's the ratio, but in any relationship, there are always two sides, both making certain wrong decisions. If people learn how to recognize them, if people learn to understand that my marriage and the happiness in my marriage are a reflection of my own choices, my actions, and what I don't know or don't understand, there may be things I consider to be my strengths when in reality they're actually my weaknesses. If a person isn't that self-aware, it can lead to divorce and everything falling apart.
But at the same time, I think that problems tend to have a cumulative effect. You know, in my own life, there's a story of one family where right now they have, well, a total crisis. But if you look back, you can see it started with one tiny unresolved issue, then another tiny unresolved issue, then a third, a fourth, a fifth. And today, it seems impossible to solve. Now you realize it all started with simple things. He doesn't listen to me, he doesn't understand me, and now it's gotten to the point where she says he's a bad father to their children. And this whole mess has gotten so huge. Where do you even start to untangle this huge problem that's already here now?
You put it really well. It started with, he doesn't listen to me, he doesn't understand me, and then it turned into a huge problem. So, one of the absolutely vital and essential qualities for both men and women in order to build a healthy relationship and a happy marriage is the quality of being open and honest. And I want to share a brief illustration with you all here. If you really grasp and understand the meaning of this illustration, your family will be so much happier if you get it. Imagine a man driving a car and he runs out of gas. And he noticed the fuel gauge just in time and realized he missed it, and now he's out of gas. He's completely out. So he pulls over and remembers that there's a gas station about 2 kilometers away. So he grabs a gas can and heads to that gas station. He gets there, and there's a pretty friendly lady behind the counter. He says, "Excuse me, I need some 95, please. I didn't see 95 at the pumps. Do you have 95 octane gas?" Because his car runs on 95 octane. She says, "Young man, we've been waiting for you. We're so glad you're here with us. Look, we've got diesel here, we've got windshield washer fluid, we've got gas, we've got a gas station. Look, over here we've got stands with Snickers bars, and over there is the restroom. That's it. Want a hot dog? Hot dogs are available too." And she starts telling him about everything there is. There's a lot at this gas station, but he came for the 95 octane. And he's standing there, a bit confused, and at some point he interrupts her. And he says, "I understand, but I need the 95 octane." And she starts telling him again about diesel, about windshield washer fluid, about all that stuff. And when he finally gives up on getting the 95 octane, he leaves the gas station, and as he's walking away, she yells after him, "Well, I spent my whole life building this gas station so that everything would be here. Why are you all so ungrateful? Why didn't you buy anything? Blah, blah, blah." And he calmly walks away with his gas cans to another station. So what's the moral of this story? Every family, every person has their own 95 octane gas. That's what a man needs in a relationship. And women have their own 95 octane gas too. That's what they need in a relationship. If we come to another person and get a lot of good things from them, when you're at a gas station, sometimes you want a hot dog, sometimes you want a coffee, sometimes you want a Snickers, and sometimes you really just need to fill up your tank. And very often in marriage, a woman yells at her husband saying, "I took care of the kids, I spent my best years on you, I kept the house in order, I cooked for you, I did the laundry, I did this, all of it. In other words, you always had a freshly ironed shirt because of me. And you went off to that Oksana from work, how could you?" So she yells, and she doesn't realize that at that moment, she's just like that woman at the gas station, going on about how much they have in their life. But she never actually met his needs back in 95. Because if she had actually given him everything she's yelling about in that argument, if she had given him what he needed, he would have stayed with her. But if he left, that means he didn't get what he needed from that relationship. And it works the same way for both men and women. That's why, if we learn to understand what 95 octane gasoline is for our loved one and learn to fulfill that need, if we learn to give a woman in a relationship exactly what she needs, and a woman learns to give a man exactly what he needs, then, folks, those relationships will be happy. But if you don't learn how to do this, if you keep offering, as men sometimes say, "I earn money, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't fool around, I bring all my money home to the family. What else does she need from me? Well, I can't keep romancing her all the time. I get tired after work. So what does she want from me?" Boo, 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 boo. That is, he's trying to justify it. And I don't discount the fact that he provides well for his family. And the woman is grateful to him for that. She doesn't say that you don't need to earn money. It is necessary. This is necessary. Sometimes, given her time and 15 to 20 minutes without phones but talking face to face, that's her 95th. She feels loved when they spend time together, when he gives her a flower, brings some balloons, does something for her. That's how she feels loved. And the fact that he does other things is good, but it's important to understand what her 95th is. And to give exactly that 95th. And those people who truly understand what their partner needs and fulfill that need, those people end up having very happy families. Friends, if you want to better understand the topic of relationships, I invite you to join our school, to the course called Relationships from A to Z, and you can find the details about this training below this video.
I often hear about seasons in relationships, about how the main task for a couple is to learn how to go through the different stages in a relationship. Just like we experience the seasons, summer, winter, fall, and how we adapt to living through those seasons, that's how we should go through the seasons in relationships as well. What exactly are these seasons, and how should a couple go through them the right way?
Honestly, I don't see it that way. I don't like to categorize things because I know couples who have been together for 15 years and are still on an extended honeymoon. Then there are those not even married yet, already fighting and constantly getting on each other's nerves. I don't get why they marry if they're arguing from day one. The logic there is just kind of interesting. These so called seasons are really just arbitrary, like the candy and flowers phase when you're dating, then the conquest stage where he wins her over. Honestly, that's probably the worst thing a girl can do ever. If you want to totally mess up your marriage and make sure it's super unhappy, then first, find a man who wants to win you over. And second, set things up so he has to chase after you for several months or even years, and then go ahead and start a family with him. And that's the kind of family you'll have. You'll just be washing your face with tears, both of you, if you pick yourself a conqueror. And then there's the whole candy and flowers stage. Next is the conquest phase, then marriage. In that marriage, you'll face the 3-year crisis and the man's midlife crisis. It's relative because if you're smart and reasonable, you might avoid rough patches entirely. I know that a lot of people repeatedly warned my wife and me that we'd go through this difficult adjustment period, where in those first few years we'd be constantly fighting, scratching, and yelling at each other. For the first 3 years, we really just, well, in our daily life and everything, there was so much harmony and understanding. We didn't even feel any of that friction at all. There were some other moments, things that came up later. There were times when we had to talk things out and we had some tough conversations, but the things we were afraid of never happened. So these seasons, they're really just symbolic. But what I think is really, really practical for having a happy marriage at any season of life is understanding this, the following. If we look at a traffic light, it's a tool that shows the likelihood of whether there will be an accident or not. Is it possible to go through a green light and still get into an accident? Yes, it is. Is it possible to run a red light and not get into an accident? That happens too. But if you consistently run red lights, you'll end up in an accident very quickly. A traffic light is a device that shows the likelihood of an accident you might get into. And just like a traffic light has 3 colors, in our relationships, there are also 3 states. There are green, yellow, and red states. When we're in the green state, we're joyful, we're uplifted, we're happy, we're smiling, we've rested, we've slept well, everything's fine, everything's good. When we're in the green state, we joke around, we're in a good mood. In the yellow state, there are already some external irritants, something is starting to annoy us, there's already some we don't like. But we can still respond calmly and normally, and even when someone starts to be rude or disrespectful to us, we can, so to speak, hold our horses. Because we still understand, we're semi-conscious, we already don't like something, but we still understand what's going on. The red state is a state of aggression. It's when I'm furious, when my nerves are shot, when I'm emotional, when I'm yelling, when I can't control myself properly, when my emotions are just overflowing, spilling over the edge. So the truth is, if a family wants to be truly happy, it is absolutely vital that you never try to resolve or work through your relationship issues when you're in the red or yellow state. If you're angry about something, if you're irritated, if you're disappointed, if you realize that you've hurt each other, that something just happened, and now the woman has fire in her eyes, the man is breathing this fiery air, okay, a fight is about to break out. So don't try to sort things out when you're in that red hot state. Because it's going to be a crash. It'll be a family accident, a family crash. And that's why I understand there are a lot of psychologists and different people who will say otherwise. In some cases, you can't just leave an argument unresolved. You need to sit down and talk right away, because if you leave someone in that state, that's it. They'll just keep winding themselves up, and that's really bad. I get that logic, but, well, excuse me, just because 2 people who can't control their emotions right now, just because they, in the moment, right here and now, will just end up fighting even more, calling each other names, swearing at each other. Even more will be said to each other, and that won't make anyone feel any better. They still need to calm down first, so they can actually talk normally, apologize, discuss things with arguments, talk about the real issues. For that, you need a clear mind, you need to be in a calm state. So if you're in a red state, whether it's you or your partner, your loved one, just calm down first. Go outside, take a walk, have some coffee, relax, go to the woods, take a stroll there. I don't know, whatever works for you. But just cool off a bit. get yourself back to a calm state. You should talk to your loved one when you're calm, when you've already forgiven them. Some people say, Dima, I need to tell him everything so he knows it all, and then I'll start to forgive him. I say, sure, if you tell him all that while you're in a red state, just the way you want to. But even if he was in a yellow state, he'll instantly turn red, and he'll throw so much back at you that you'll be forgiving him for the next 50 years. You don't need to do that. First, calm down. And this goes for both men and women. Calm down, take a breath, forgive. And once you've already forgiven, then go to your loved one and start sorting things out. Because if your loved one, at that moment, they might get worked up. You start saying, listen, I was actually upset with you because you said this back then, and you did that, and I felt this way, and so on and so forth. And you start explaining all this while you're in a calm state. Your words can set the person off. Your partner might quickly slip into a yellow state, or even a red one, and start yelling back at you, like, you ruined my whole life. But if you're in a calm state yourself, you understand my loved one is just having an emotional reaction right now. I can listen to this calmly. When you're in a calm state, you won't yell back, you won't lose your composure. But when both of you are in a red or yellow state and try to sort things out, it'll only make things worse. That's why, if you want to have a happy relationship and avoid arguments, never try to resolve things or discuss your relationship when you're not in a calm state. Both of you need to be in a green state. When you're in a green state, when you're, so to speak, driving on green, accidents are very unlikely. But if you keep running red lights, you'll constantly be dealing with the consequences of those crashes. Friends, if you enjoy the content we create, you can support our team. We have a lot of different projects, we run various pages and invite different guests, and that's why we often find ourselves in need. We need your support. If you want to make sure there's even more content like what you see and hear, and help us change other people's lives together with you, you can check out the information below this video and support us, investing in our work in any way that's convenient for you. Thank you so much for your support.
How to deal with the aftermath of those very types of emotional accidents, because sometimes in relationships, one person can manipulate, say hurtful things, belittle, or inflict deep emotional pain, and they might not just do it a single time. But to do it systematically, and again, this will have a cumulative effect. How do you cope with this pain? How do you start talking about it? How do you make sure you're heard? And how do you get rid of this pain and forgive the person?
Well, first of all, you need to remember that your loved one is not your enemy. You might feel that way in the moment, but even when your husband says something really hurtful, maybe he called you something extremely bad, or did something really wrong, some sneaky act that you interpret as betrayal, and you realize you can't trust him anymore, or something like that. I'm not talking about physical infidelity, like when he sleeps with someone else. I'm talking about when you feel like he betrayed your trust, or something like that, or something similar. Here, it's important to remember that your husband is not your enemy. You didn't start a family thinking, okay, now we're married and I'm going to make him miserable, he'll make me miserable, and we're just going to ruin each other's lives. You don't want that, do you? You started a family to be happy together. And so understanding that he's not your enemy and you're not his enemy, that you're together against some problem, will already help lower the tension a bit. If you utilize this scale we discussed in detail earlier, and you collaborate to resolve everything together, only when you're in a calm green state, and not when you're in the red or yellow, irritated or angry, that will also be the right contribution to keeping things peaceful and normal. Family life. When you don't close yourself off, but instead try to talk to a priest, a psychologist, a counselor, or maybe write your emotions down in a journal, that will help you gradually learn to process your emotions in a healthy, natural way. Because letting go of the pain you have is something people often just can't do. It's hard alone. You think, I want to forgive, but you just can't. If you could, you would have. Something inside won't let go, clinging to that pain and resentment. So when you ask someone for help, they can see things objectively and ask, hey, why are you holding on to this anyway? And don't you think that this is a result of that? So the right person can ask you a few questions that might lead you to realize that maybe it wasn't worth it. Like when you start giving so much importance to these particular events, it'll actually be much easier for you to forgive. Because I really like how it's written in the Bible that before you try to take the tiny speck out of someone else's eye, you should first take the large log out of your own eye. And so, when we shift our focus from what he did, how he was wrong, how much he hurt me, hit me with his words, and so on, how he set me up, left me hanging, didn't listen to me, and so on. When instead of focusing on those things, we focus on where I was, what I was doing, what I was feeling at that moment. If it's a girl, that's what she's thinking about. So the focus shifts to yourself, and then a person might realize that maybe in this relationship, I was also yelling back. Maybe in this relationship, I also didn't respect him. Maybe in this relationship, I didn't listen, didn't hear him, didn't believe him. Maybe in this relationship, I also gossiped about him with someone else. And in this way, a person sees a bit of their own share of responsibility for why the situation turned out the way it did. And then, instead of being in the state of, I'm a victim, he treated me so badly, she moves into a state of, we both messed up a little, we both made mistakes, we both did some foolish things. Thank you. We both need to dig ourselves out of this a little bit. And that's why I think it's a bit easier to forgive another person when you realize that you don't always act perfectly either.